Just a note to everyone, we will be live streaming this webinar on our Facebook page, so you can check and share that as well. And yeah, inshallah, we'll be starting in a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Inshallah, I think we'll make a start now on the webinar, and anyone else who's able to join will be able to make a start in due course. I'm just gonna share screen and we can make a start on. So firstly, welcome to the Muslim Council of Scotland's Reopening Mosques in Scotland webinar, an online discussion for all of us in the community to discuss quite an important topic at this critical juncture. My name is Zara Mohammed and I'm the Head of Media and Communications for the Muslim Council of Scotland. Today's programme, inshallah, will begin with some Quran recitation and an introduction by our chair, Dr. Mohammed Rafiq Habib. Brother Omar Afzal will then present the kind of guidance and strategy moving forward. This is a contribution of work between the Muslim Council of Britain, the Muslim Council of Scotland, Muslim Council of Wales, and the British Islamic Medical Association, as well as a number of scholars. And then we'll open it up to all of you for a question and answer session. If you do have any questions while Omar is speaking, please do put them in the chat box and then we will come back to them. And of course, we do ask you to kind of maybe wait until Omar's finished speaking and then you'll be able to see if your points are covered. And we'll try and keep it concise and make sure that everybody does have an opportunity to speak. I would now like to pass it to Dr. Mohammed Habib to begin with some Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Mohammed. I think that brings us quite nicely, just for a quick introduction for those of you who may not be aware of the Muslim Council of Scotland and the work that we do. There are three key areas that we kind of seek to do, which is representation, support, and strengthen, and that is in all spheres of the community work. That covers a cross range of activities, including interfaith, working in the charitable sectors, representing the community and community response, such as the New Zealand attacks, and even representing our community at the Scottish Parliament and to the Scottish Government. Aside from that, being a national umbrella, we do try and ensure that we are coordinated with the Muslim Council of Britain. When there is a cause close to the community's heart, that we're there in response, and also making sure that we provide training and support where possible. And more importantly, I think it's really great to highlight the incredible work you've been doing in making sure that the representation of Muslims has been very strong, especially in providing that community support despite the conditions of lockdown. So just a really quick summary there of in a nutshell of what we do and how we do it. But I would now like to pass it over to Omar Afzal, and I think the part of this that you're all been waiting for, which is to begin the discussion on how we can begin to reopen and then open it up to the floor.
Jazakallah khairan, Sister Zara. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Jazakumullah khairan for sparing some time on a Sunday afternoon, a sunny Sunday afternoon, to come along to the webinar here today. And what we're discussing here today is something which has been on everyone's mind, certainly since this pandemic started and since we went into lockdown. And that is how we can start to think about how the Masajid and places of worship for Muslims move out of lockdown. Now, at the start of the lockdown, alhamdulillah, our mosque leaders and the umbrella bodies showed an incredible degree of strong and sensible leadership when we made the heartbreaking decision to shut the Masajid. Now, as we look towards the lockdown restrictions easing and coming out of lockdown, we look to the Masajid, the mosque leaders and the imams for the same sort of strength and sensible leadership as we move out of lockdown. So, I mean, the situation just now very much is that the feedback from the community is mixed. Some people are hesitant about opening the places of opening the masjid back up. Others are very keen for that to happen as soon as possible. Last month, Nicola Sturgeon released a route map for easing lockdown restrictions, which many of you will have seen. And essentially to that, there's 4 phases. The first phase is the one that we're in just now. The second phase of that is where places of worship are mentioned. Places of worship will be able to open for private prayer with physical distancing and hygiene safeguards. And they'd also allow marriages and other types of ceremonies to take place with a limited number of attendees. Phase 3 is where places of worship can open to extended groups, subject again to physical distancing and hygiene safeguards, and slightly more attendance at certain services. And phase 4 is where we go into what is widely being described as a new normal, where all ceremonies can take place with improved hygiene and other precautions. So when you look at the roadmap that the Scottish Government is using in terms of coming out of lockdown, it's very clear that there's going to be significant behavioural changes to make as we stay clear, as we try to stay clear of the virus. And what is clear is that this virus is still out there, that it's still dangerous, it's still infectious, and there's still deaths occurring. And that means that Masajid need to take precautions to protect Musallis, imams and volunteers and staff. So that's essentially what this guidance document that we've been working on with the MCB, MCW and with the British Islamic Medical Association is about. And that's what today's event actually is about. It's about giving you some sight of the guidance, listening to your feedback on that and your general comment. We were actually hoping to have a published draft of this earlier on in the weekend on Friday night, but due to some technical reasons with some of the content, that wasn't possible. You also may have seen the announcement last night from the Westminster government in terms of relaxing lockdown restrictions for places of worship starting from the 15th of this month. I must stress that at this point in time, that is only in England. It doesn't apply up here in Scotland. We're still following the roadmap that was laid out last month by Nicola Sturgeon. And the feeling that we're getting from the Scottish Government is that you're looking at somewhere around the first week of July for those restrictions to be lifted for us to move into the next phase. It may well be earlier than that, but certainly what that means for us as a community is that we need to be prepared, first of all, to make the decision whether we want to open, and second of all, if we are reopening, what kind of measures we need to have in place in order for that to happen, and in order for us to protect our community during the course of this pandemic as it plays out, certainly over the next 6 months, but maybe even beyond that. So the guidance that's been prepared is 9 steps to prepare for reopening. And essentially, it's based on 3 key areas. The first area is measures that need to be taken before you can actually open your doors. The second is measures around prayer. And the third is contingency measures. So the first 5 steps are basically the measures that we believe need to be taken before you can realistically open. And these 5 steps actually, they serve a second purpose, and that is to inform your decision-making process. As I mentioned earlier, there's no compulsion or expectation on Masajid to swing their doors open on day 1 of phase 2. We want you to open when you feel you're prepared and you can manage with the public coming back in. So the first 5 steps of this document is to help inform that decision-making process of when and how you should open. So if you take a look at the first step within those first 5 steps, and that's titled Plan to Decide. So essentially what that is, again, it's getting you to have a think within your own organisation how you can start to move towards a position where you can open, or whether it is even right for you to be opening. And the very first point in that that we'd like to emphasise that we think is an important recommendation is that you appoint a COVID safety officer. Now, that might be a bit kind of jargon heavy, but essentially what that means is that you've got one person in your organisation who's a central point of contact in terms of the COVID crisis and in terms of reopening, and that's also the person who hopefully we will be communicating with, helping to train up and to keep informed of all the latest guidance as and when it emerges. And that's the person who will have the responsibility, along with a small team, to make sure that Masajid are able to open. Along with that first step, we're advising you to also look at things like your insurance policies, to look at things like security systems, etc., as you do start to consider whether it's right to open back up. The second thing that you need to consider is how you're going to plan the space. So with that, it's a case of calculating what your new maximum capacity is going to be based on social distancing guidelines. And the guidelines, as you're all well aware, we've been going through them for the last couple of months, is this 2 metre distance. So what that's essentially going to mean is that one must lead 2 metres, another must lead 2 metres, and then possibly a gap between the SUFs as well. So you've got staggered SUFs. So essentially, what we've worked out is that that's going to mean of your original capacity, you're probably looking at around 15 to 20% of your original capacity will be your new capacity. And the key thing that's going to be important is marking out prayer spaces, ensuring that non-essential spaces remain closed, and also making sure that the toilets and wudu areas also remain closed. The important thing with that is because of the nature of this disease, which does transmit through particles, the water particles as well. So it's important that the wudu areas at this point in time remain closed, as with other non-essential spaces. Then we've got to ensure that we've got good ventilation, which may just mean opening all the windows, making sure that entrances are planned and exits are planned as well. So the next step then is understanding what equipment and what supplies you might need in order to safely reopen. So that's going to be things like PPE, it's going to be things like signage, it's going to be things like maybe physical street furniture outside in order to control queues as people come and go from the masjid, hand sanitizer dispensers, cleaning equipment and cleaning supplies. Alhamdulillah, I'm pleased to make you aware that there's a group of brothers in England who are working on setting up a portal for masjids, whereby they'll be able to order a lot of this equipment directly from suppliers. So it essentially cuts out the possibility of not being able to get PPE, which is something that we faced when it came to funerals very early on in the pandemic. So inshallah, that's something that's been worked on and hopefully should be made available in the next couple of weeks as well. The fourth step then, and I'm going through this pretty quickly because what today is about hearing from everybody else and hearing your thoughts and feedback and maybe even your fears as well, and hopefully talking through that. So part 4 is step 4 is planning your staff and volunteers, making sure that the COVID safety officer is aware of their responsibilities and is passing that down to other volunteers and other members of staff, making sure that there's a rota in place so that all the prayer times are covered, or indeed if you're opening for extended periods, making sure that those periods are covered as well. Initially, we would advise simply opening for a short period of time around prayer time, and then as things progress, hopefully as we start to move out and restrictions start to lift, we can look at hopefully extending the times that the Masjids are open. The other thing to consider is crowd control, training staff in PPE, and also training staff on how to actually deal with members of the public, speak to them, reassure them, and tell them why the measures that are in place are actually in place. And that leads us on then to the 5th step, and that is how we prepare the community for the new changes in the masjid. Now, ultimately, that's going to be probably one of the biggest challenges, is making people understand that there is a new way of doing things in the masjid, and it's for their safety, and it's for their and it's a precaution that the masjid has to take as a responsible organisation, as a responsible public place, as we do ease out of lockdown. So the key thing there would be things like signage. It'd be things like making sure you're communicating with members of public, with the Muslims through social media, and also maybe for members of the congregation who maybe don't have access to social media, like elders, maybe phoning them up and letting them know what's happening. One of the most effective things that I think personally is going to help in terms of communicating the message to the wider public is maybe if you make a short video showing a walkthrough of how it's going to work in terms of coming to the masjid, maybe queuing outside, maybe pre-booking for prayer, and then coming into the masjid, performing the prayer, and then leaving the masjid. That can be a very effective tool in order to make people understand of what the new normal procedures are for the next few months. So that essentially is the considerations that you need to make before you even decide when or if you want to open. So once you've taken that into account, and if you have made the decision to open, then the next consideration really is how we plan the prayer. Now, one of the main worries here is how we control numbers, and there's a number of different schools of thought as to how we do that. Some people have said that it'll simply just be a queuing system, first come, first serve. Other people have suggested things like Eventbrite, setting up events for each prayer to make sure that you've got the numbers there, so people have to present a QR code before they can come in. That's not maybe practicable, especially in the community where you might have elders who want to come or people who aren't tech savvy. But really, you would have to have some kind of system in place to limit the numbers. And then the second thing is how then you manage the queues outside, how you manage people entering into the masjid, the prayer itself, making sure people are adhering to the social distancing guides that you've got in the main hall, and then how they exit as well. In some cases, Masajid will be able to put in place a one-way system, but that's not always the case, because the majority of our mosques are actually converted buildings as opposed to purpose built. So really it's a case of thinking about in your own building how best you can manage the flow of people and how best you can minimise the risk of infection from other people. So that's again a key thing to consider, and also an important part of the masjid. What you're seeing on the screen just now is a kind of mock-up of how potentially the prayer hall could look like, with staggered safs and with the spaces in between each musalli. That might not be the case with every hall being a perfect square, understandably, but really it's something that we need to consider based on the space that we have in our own buildings and how best we can manage that. So the next step then is how we plan the actual prayer, and then that again, the recommendations are the same as when we were starting to ease into lockdown, and that is really keeping the prayer short, advising the musallis that the musallis pray their sunnahs at home and just come purely for the congregational aspect. and also allowing clear time between the various Jamaats in order to make sure you can clean, wipe down surfaces, and then prepare for the next Jamaat as well. Many people have expressed an interest in having multiple Jamaats. So again, this is something that will have to be planned in advance, and in terms of the length of time you need to leave in between to allow people to come and go, and also to allow for that wipe down and clean up before the next Jamaat can come in. So again, that leads into the next step, which is post prayer. And again, that's cleaning afterwards, disposing of PPE, walking the masjid potentially between prayers, and also making sure that you continue to the immense work that's been done by the imams in terms of putting out online content for people to engage with from their homes. Instead of having to come to the masjid, they can listen to lectures, they can listen to dars, they can join in with majlises of zikr, for example, from home. And it's important that that continues. People still feel as if they're part and parcel of the home masjid experience, even though they can't physically come or partake. It's also important that we reiterate to people who are attending the masjid that there can't be any social gathering in the masjid or indeed outside. And I know that for some people attending the masjid may well be um, their only form of social interaction in the day, but we've got to make clear that things like shaking hands or standing for prolonged periods of time within the masjid or in the masjid grounds unfortunately can't happen as we do ease out of lockdown. And then the final step is the third part, as I mentioned, of the guidance, and that is planning for contingencies. Now, as I mentioned at the very start, we're not over this pandemic yet. There's still a number of deaths, unfortunately, from this pandemic. There's an emerging trend which says that BAME communities are of a higher risk, and Muslims have a large proportion of BAME community within its community. So there's also some science out there to suggest that there may also be a second wave of infection. So these are all things that we've got to think about and we've got to bear in mind and have got to prepare for as we do think about reopening. So the key thing there is going to be things like having a complaints procedure, having a feedback procedure as well, so people can tell you what's working and what's not working, and also thinking about guidelines around contact tracing as well. And these are conversations that are still ongoing with the Scottish Government. For everyone, this is a new situation, so there's things that they also don't know, and they're trying to confirm for us. And one of those is the possibility that you might have to keep a register of people who are coming and going from the masjid for contact tracing purposes. You may well find that that some of your volunteers will be called up and told that they have to self-isolate because of contact tracing. So again, you would have to be prepared with a large enough team to make sure that if somebody drops out to have to self-isolate, you can fill that position. And also, if one of the Musallis does contract COVID, is tested positive for COVID, what is it that the masjid has to do in that circumstance? So again, that's a consideration that we've got to make before we consider reopening. So finally, the masjid is a place that's for all. So in some cases, we may well be thinking those masjids that have a prayer area for sisters may just be thinking to open up for brothers. But it's important that we do cater for the whole community as much as we possibly can. So if you do have a sisters area and you are able to reopen that, then it's important that that happens as well, that no group is disadvantaged. So that in a nutshell is a high level overview of the guidance document. There's still many other pieces of guidance to add in. There's still a lot of kind of appendices and things to add in as well. One of the things that we've developed is a risk assessment as well. So that's something again that you can use in order to think about and have that conversation internally about whether you are ready to open, and if you do open, how that looks, what the challenges may be, what the risks are, what the hazards are, and how best you can mitigate that. Finally, the last thing to say is that this guidance, it's not prescriptive and it's not exhaustive either. So this is it's something that you can use. It's completely up to you actually how you use it, how you implement it, and how you apply it to your own situation in the ground. And today is really about your feedback. It's about what else you would like to see from us, certainly as a representative body. What messages do you want us to relay back to the Scottish Government? What do you want us to speak to, for example, the police about, or to other statutory authorities, make them aware of? And what else you'd like to see generally MCS do throughout this pandemic, or any extra guidance that you feel you might need. So at that, then I'll pass it back to Sister Zara, who will begin the Q&A, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Okay, thank you, Omar. And I think that was really informative and very clear. Just in case anybody is worried, we will be sending you the PDF of that full document so you can review it and look over it in great detail. If, like me, you wear glasses, you need the time to go through all those infographics. Now, there's a few questions on the chat, and what we'll do is we'll alternate between those who would like to ask questions physically. There is a little way of putting your hand up on Zoom if you do want to speak. Not physically hand, but there is a little icon of a hand, which is in the chat section where you can raise your hand. So hopefully you can find that. But if anyone can't find it, just wave your hand. But I'll just start. There's a question here in the chat by Faisal Hussein. Has this plan been proposed to the Scottish Government? What was the response?
So this plan hasn't been proposed to the Scottish Government, but we are going to make it available to them. And we welcomed their feedback on it. What has been clear from the Scottish Government is that communities need to take ownership of their own places of worship, and the guidance that they're going to be issuing will again be at a higher level. It's not going to be prescriptive either, so it'll be interesting to see how that matches up with what we're proposing here. And actually, we're in the same position as other faith communities as well. So a couple of the church groups, for example, are looking to publish guidance next week as well, and that's before the Scottish Government publishes its guidance. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But going by past experience from the guidance that we issued, for example, around funerals and around actually when we were entering into lockdown, I don't think we'll be too far off the mark here. I think we're pretty much on the button. But the important thing here is that we take ownership of our own community, that we take ownership of our own places of worship, and that we are actually leading the conversation in terms of how we reopen. And that was actually one of the critical things that happened when we went into lockdown. We closed the Masjids before the country went into lockdown, and actually before other places of worship shut down as well. And all that showed to the Scottish Government was that we were serious about this, that we are a credible group, a credible community, and that our mosque leaders are credible, they are strong, and they are sensible in their approach towards dealing with this pandemic. So I think whilst we will have that conversation with the Scottish Government, it is very much for us to decide how we will mitigate the risks in our places of worship. And I think it shows a degree of strong leadership from us that we are having that conversation without it being instigated by the Scottish
Government. We have 2 hands up now, so I'm just going to stop you there. Brother Shaukat Sultan, and then Brother Muhammad, I think Sarwar. So if I could just ask you to speak just very quickly, within a minute, if you could give your question. Brother Shaukat.
Thanks, Sister Zara, Omar, and Dr. Habib for all guidance. I'd like to know that are we going to draft any message for WhatsApp to send people that they should be ready for mosque and how they come and how we communicate with them? So if you send the message, then that could be better and they will be ready for the mosque opening. And Brother, Brother Hamza, like to ask a question as well, please.
Okay, sure.
I've just got a quick question, a quick request. There's a lot of mixed opinions going about right now in the community in terms of what date people are saying they're going to allow masjids to open certain date. There's a lot of mixed messages going around. So can you just briefly summarize quickly, like in a timeline of dates of when each phase will be implemented for our masjids specifically?
Okay, thank you.
Brother Shaukat, your question around communicating. That's going to be key here. Communicating with the musallis is actually going to be the critical thing to make sure that the measures that we put in place by the masjids actually work. And as I said, the most effective way to do that is actually to make a small video of what the new normal is going to be in the masjid as we ease out of lockdown. Having that walkthrough from coming from out the pavement right the way through to coming back out to the pavement in terms of how we use the masjid. And as you say, I mean, WhatsApp is a very powerful way of doing that. We will be looking at drafting templates and things that people can use and can adjust to put out to their musallis. And again, if you go back to the guidance that we issued on funerals, alongside the guidance for funeral providers, we released a very simple 3-point graphic that was to go out to the public, which again had 3 key points on it in terms of what funerals are going to involve. So we're happy to do that again. The point that the second brother made there in terms of timeline, that's the difficult one, because the timeline is very much dependent on things like the measures that the government is using in terms of determining how it opens the country back up. So that's things like the R number, the rate of infection, how much we flatten the curve, that kind of thing. So these things that you've been hearing over the past couple of months, that's what's going to be that's what the government's going to be looking at in terms of putting dates to the different phases. They are reviewing it every 3 weeks. That's not set in stone. We could see the second phase coming in earlier, but as things stand, the kind of the kind of noise that we're hearing is that you're looking at about the first week of July. Inshallah, it may be earlier for those masjids who are keen to open and who are ready to open. But as I say, there is absolutely no compulsion on anyone to open if they don't feel they're ready to. But in terms of the dates, it's very much dependent on how this pandemic is panning out.
Okay, Brother Sarwar, do you want to speak now?
Thank you very much for your hard work which you are doing for the community, Muslim community. Well, I have a couple of things to suggestions. Number one, that if you can ask the Scottish government that they can provide the temperature checking gun through the MHS to every mosque. So on the door, somebody can check the temperature that somebody have the symptoms of the COVID-19 or not. If somebody had, then they must be returned from the door. They should not be allowed to get inside the door. Number two, that's the age limit. We was actually listening from different sources that they are going to oppose any age limit, that the persons over the age of 70 or so would not able to come to the mosque or what. Because the majority of our old people, they come to the mosque rather than the youngest. So as I am 75, but I am okay. I can do my things, everything. So if suppose that if they impose that restrictions, so that could be they're going to restrict my religious duties, you know. So I don't like that way, that somebody stop me to going to mosque just for the reason that I am over 70 or I am 75. So I am the founder member of my mosque. You know, I'm trustee of my mosque, and I play a very valuable part in my establishing my mosque. Mr. Dr. Rafiq Habib knows me personally. He used to work for us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, brother. Thank you, Brother Sarwar. And what I'm going to do is I'll ask Omar to answer that, and then I'm going to take questions in 2s and 3s, just so we allow for enough time. And just again, remind everybody to be as concise as possible. Omar, I'll let you respond to that now. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is up to the individual masjid whether they want to have screening at the door or not. It is mentioned in the guidance, but it's entirely up to the individual masjid as to whether they want to do that. The thing about temperature checking is that it's not really indicative of whether somebody has COVID-19 or not. That's something that's emerged quite clearly over the last couple of months. And people can also be asymptomatic but still be carriers of the disease. So we still have to look at what measures we put in place in terms of mitigating that risk. And in terms of actually supplying the guns, again, we're hopeful that when this portal opens up, which gives the Masajid access directly to a PPE supplier, they'll be able to get that at trade prices. And also they would have a continuous supply of things like temperature guns if they want it, or PPE as well. In terms of the second point that you made, Sab, in terms of the age limit, this has probably been the most difficult thing for me personally in terms of when the masjids first put in restrictive practices, because alhamdulillah, our elders, the protective shade that they place over our community is what shields us. It's their protective shade that keeps our community's heartbeat ticking. It's them who through their sacrifices lift us up as the next generation as well. So for me personally, and I know for a lot of people in my position in Masajid across the country, that's been the most difficult thing. Many of our elders would come and they'd spend a lot of time in the masjid. It'd be a place of socializing for them as well. But we also need to look at mitigating risk as well. And if you are somebody who are from that age group, you are at a higher risk. Now, again, it's going to come down to individual masjids as to how they would regulate that. If the guidelines from the Scottish Government still say that elders of a certain age are having to stay at home, then unfortunately the masjids will have to comply with that. But the best thing that Masajid can do is make sure that the imams are reaching out to the individuals, making sure that we're still streaming content online. In Glasgow, some masjids still use an old-fashioned radio system, which many people have in their homes, making sure that we're still able to reach out like that. And ultimately, Uncle Sarwar, you don't need me to tell you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala his mercy is boundless, his reward is boundless as well. And inshallah, he will reward you abundantly for the sacrifices that you're making, inshallah.
Thank you for that. I want to just ask Asma and I believe Brother Bashir Chauhan, if Asma can go first, and then Brother Bashir, and then I'll ask a few questions on the chat as well. We haven't forgotten you.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Just very quickly, I've not been in Scotland for a few years, so forgive me if any of this is factually incorrect. I only stay in touch with the ulama, and judging by the conversation on the various WhatsApp groups, there seems to be a spectrum of people that are very proactive, and there are also some committees where they have it comes across as they've been lumped, the imams have been lumped with the full responsibility of doing all the things that you mentioned in your presentation. I just going to make a small suggestion, because we're down here in England and we're seeing a lot of this, possibly even before Scotland. There are other resources. I think Umar had invited suggestions. Faith Associates, not that I'm trying to endorse any organizations, but Faith Associates do already have 3 videos on their website. I can send the link to Umar because I know him personally later on, and that seems to have made a big difference. And the last point that Umar mentioned is, I know you guys are all probably putting in voluntary efforts. You're not on pay packets, etc., and I appreciate that, like all organizations. But if you can centralize more and more, the purchase was an excellent suggestion. Maybe even consider, if you guys can, appointing an officer to do the risk assessments for the masajid. Again, it's something that's been provided down south. So I'll leave those suggestions with your kind consideration. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. And Brother Bashir, if I could ask you to speak next. Oh, you'll need to unmute yourself. Brother Bashir, you need to unmute. There we go. That's great.
I've got two or three systems there, because one failing.
I think you might have to disconnect a couple of those for it to work clearly. Brother Bashir, can you hear us? I think there's some technical problems.
Should we come back to Bashir Sab?
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll come back. I'll just ask you some of the questions in the chat. Sister Farah suggested, will MCS be able to make a video in different languages to explain the importance of these messages? We need to get as many spoken languages involved, not just written English. And a question around any idea when children will be allowed to come back to continue their Islamic studies?
Okay. So the questions, first of all, that Brother Aswar asked in terms of the various other guidances that are available out there. Alhamdulillah, there is a lot of guidance out there. What we've tried to do with the one that we've developed here is to keep it as simple as possible. Those of you who have worked with me when I was involved with media and comms, and also now involved with the Masjids, I'm a stickler for making things easy to read and making things easy to follow. What I found personally from a lot of the guidance that's been it was very long, it was very detailed. It was running in some cases into 40 or 50 pages just for funeral guidance. We've tried to keep this as simple as possible. It's always good to have other pieces of guidance as well. And I'll reiterate what I said at the start, that this is to help organisations. It's something kind of that's part of your weaponry, if you like, in terms of fighting COVID-19. That doesn't mean that you only use this. It means you can look at other guidance as well. Use that if you find that more effective as well. And the videos, as I said, is probably the most effective tool. And it'd be great if you can pass on those links, and inshallah we'll be able we'll be able to share them. In terms of MCS appointing somebody to carry out the risk assessments, we don't have the finances to do that. We don't have the resources to do that, unfortunately. This is why we've made the risk assessment available to the Masjids themselves in order to do that. There is a lot of technical expertise in our community, alhamdulillah. So if we're able to tap into that, it'd be good to do that. I know from one of the national webinars that MCB were doing that somebody offered their services on a webinar. They were IOSH and NEBOSH trained, and they offered their services whilst on the webinar. So inshallah, I mean, if we can tap into any local assets and expertise that we have, then that's probably the best way to go about it. So yeah, so the video thing, yeah, completely. That's something that's going to be very important moving forward.
Okay, I think Brother Bashir, I don't know if he's still available or not. I guess another point just to add, we appreciate.
Sorry, just quickly on Fada's point there, I didn't answer that. Sorry. Okay. In terms of different languages, again, that's going to be critical. That's something actually that we will look to the Scottish Government to help us with. Because of obviously the resources and things. When we did go into lockdown, I personally made a request to the police to turn the messages that they were putting out into different languages so that we could share them as well. But unfortunately, they only put them into Romanian, which there isn't many Romanians in the Muslim community, so it wasn't as effective as maybe it being in other languages. But certainly that is an excellent point and an excellent consideration that we're already talking to the Scottish Government about.
Or just a point on Islamic classes for kids reopening.
In terms of reopening classes, again, we would see that as non-essential at this point. So the classes would have to remain virtual. From the Masjids that I've spoken to who are running virtual classes, they seem to be running really well. The children have settled into it, the ustads have settled into it. So it's important that the deed continues just now, whilst we kind of work our way through the different phases of lockdown. I can't envisage classes going back, certainly not before the schools go back in August, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah, just another point made on the chat about pushing for open ground to be used as mandatory prayers on Fridays if it's unlikely and far away for the mosques. I think that's just a comment. Again, just opening up to the floor if there are any other contributions anybody else would like to make. I appreciate quite a lot of notable mosque figures. Does anybody else have any questions? I think a question that we received earlier, which I can ask you, was the UK NHS did antibody studies for doctors. Is this useful for going back to mosques? Maybe if everyone did the test, people can go back to their prayers in normal life?
That's an interesting question. I'm not of a medical background, so I don't want to delve into something that isn't in my lane, so to speak. But what I will say is this, that whether somebody is symptomatic or not, they can still be carriers of this disease, such as the nature of it. So whether people are kind of immune to it or have had it and have recovered XYZ, it still doesn't mitigate the fact that they may still be carriers. So it means that it means that we can't go back to normal, unfortunately, as soon as we enter into a new phase of the roadmap. We're still going to have to take the necessary precautions, and we're still going to have to make sure that people are following social distancing guidelines and are following self-isolation rules as well if they do come in contact with somebody or if they are showing symptoms. So it's going to be critical whether you are whether you do the antibody test or not, that you still follow those guidelines, because you may not be showing symptoms, but you might still be a carrier.
Yeah, definitely a really important point. I guess another kind of question is, how do we manage people's emotional and kind of mental well-being during this time? Specifically, as we know that the elderly community, which is the most vulnerable, will may have to be turned away from being able to pray in the mosque, and also there may be a lot of anxiety for people as well coming back to the mosque, and how do they manage under these conditions? So what kind of role do we have to play with that?
Yeah, so I mean, lockdown has been an interesting time for many people. Some people have adjusted very well to it. For other people, it's been incredibly difficult. For some people, it's been a voyage of self-discovery. For other people, it's been an incredibly hellish time as they adjust to kind of being on their own, or maybe not having the kind of social contact that they're used to. So different people are going to react in different ways, and certainly when the masjid opens back up as well, different people will react in different ways. For some people, they may still have a fear of being infected and might think that for them it's best that they stay away. That's perfectly okay. And as I mentioned at the very start, I mean, there's absolutely no compulsion on any masjid to open their doors if they feel they're not ready to do so. This guidance document is double-edged, in that on the one hand it's a document which gives you very easy to follow steps in terms of reopening, but it also serves as a document to start that conversation as to when or if you should open and what shape that should take. In terms of reaching out, I mean, again, I'm not saying this to just to make my numbers with anyone, but I was absolutely delighted and heartwarmed when I saw the amount of content that's been put out by Masjids and imams online. In Aberdeen, you had Sheikh Ibrahim Malawi and the things that he's been streaming. In Dundee, Mawlana Zubair Karim. And in Fife, you've had Sheikh Mansour. In Edinburgh, you've had Mawlana Rashad Zab. And here in Glasgow, there's been a number of masjids doing a number of different things in terms of streaming, and indeed the app from iSyllabus as well. So there's been a lot of different things, and I mean the late night live sessions that Mawlana Abdullah Fursab has been running from Glasgow Central Mosque. I mean, these have been absolutely immense, and they've been amazing for the community to actually tap into. Mawlana Zain Al Abidin in Glasgow, for example, he's been streaming his zikr majlises as well. So again, people have had this opportunity to tap into things that would have been their normal kind of practice at the masjid, and they've been able to feel part of that community still, even though they are staying away. not being able to physically go into the masjid is incredibly difficult. I know that from my own experience. I know that from my elderly father who stays with me. That is one of the most difficult and heartbreaking things to not be able to do. But under the circumstances, it's absolutely necessary. And as I said at the start, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his mercy and his reward is unlimited. And
Omar,
he
we
will
just
make-
have, so we've got a hand raise from Imam Ishaq from Al
Okay.
Furqan Mosque. If you'd like to speak now, inshallah.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. The most thing the brother Umar has already covered, but I just about this point about elderly anxiety about not going to masjid. A lot of elderly people, they contacted me, and I always says that, as brother Umar said, that the Prophet ﷺ said that if somebody is doing something in his siha, when he's well, like going to masjid or going to Jummah or reading namaz with Jamaat. And if he is not going or she's not going or she's not doing that act because of genuine reason, then they will get reward, inshallah, during that time without doing that act. So when I told these to our older people, they are very satisfied that I said that you should have this yaqeen on Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala that He will reward you the same as you was doing before this time. So they should be, told that they are getting reward. They shouldn't get this anxiety of not going to mosque, but actually sometime not going to mosque and not, spreading this disease to others. This is more rewardable than going to masjid. For example, before musafaha, like doing salam and doing musafaha, that was sunnah, and now it is not doing musafaha. This is sunnah because you are not spreading the disease. So if we educate, inshallah, our elders and give them a surety that they are getting same reward, then inshallah they will be okay. Jazakumullah.
Thank you so much, Imam. Omar, just another few points that have come through. How important is it to recognize the risk to the Black, Asian and minority ethnic community at this time, given that we know that studies have shown that there obviously is a disproportionate impact that's happening? And can imams do live streams while furloughed is another question. And then just another final point, which is how important is it for mosques and communities to work with the external community, local councils, the police, and different agencies to make sure that reopening can be done smoothly?
Okay, yeah, alhamdulillah, excellent questions. Jazakumullah khairan to Ustad Mohammed Ishaq Sahab for his contribution there as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve and protect you for our community, alhamdulillah. So the first question in terms of risk to the BEAM community, this is something that is still an emerging trend. So the data that was compiled in England and Wales certainly showed that there was an increased risk to BEAM communities. When you look across the country in terms of hotspots as well, the hotspots are in where you would see a high concentration of BEAM communities, and indeed frontline workers tend to be BEAM communities. And in terms of poverty as well, poverty and socioeconomic factors which can impact as well, BEAM communities again are a high risk. We've not had the data that we need in Scotland in order to make those same conclusions. This is something again that's been requested of the Scottish Government because we need to be looking at how we can mitigate any potential extra risk that there is to BEAM communities here in Scotland as well. There has been a paper published which showed that potentially in Scotland there isn't as high a risk as there was shown in England and Wales, but that paper hasn't been peer reviewed. I would stress at this point in time it's not been peer reviewed and it's still a pre-paper as well. So we're still waiting on that data to come out in Scotland, but I think it is very important based on what the trend is in England and Wales that we do take those extra precautions, and that's something that I mentioned at the start as well. In terms of whether the imam can live stream while he's furloughed, one of the conditions of the furlough is that the person doesn't work for that organisation, either in a paid capacity or in a voluntary capacity. So unfortunately, the imam wouldn't be able to live stream. Now, one of the conversations that we had with the Scottish Government was around the fact that the places of worship, mosques, churches, etc., have fallen through the cracks when it's come to things like funding. And I actually personally wrote to the Cabinet Secretary for Finance as well to request that the scheme that we made available for small businesses to apply for the £10,000 grant was extended to include places of worship, because although we don't pay rates, although we're rates exempt, many of those places of worship do still fall under that category of being within the rates register. So the Scottish Government then did actually give us a concession, which was that the Third Sector Resilience Fund, you can actually apply for that as a place of worship, and many other faith groups have applied for that. And this is something that we did mention in our last bulletin to our affiliates as well. So the Third Sector Resilience Fund will allow you to apply for costs. It's not going to replace income that you've lost. So you wouldn't be putting in, for example, what your normal Jadar Sharif is on a Friday. If, for example, your Friday collection is, for talking sake, £800 or £1,000 a week, that's not what you'd put into that form. What you'd be putting in the form for that specific fund is what your costs are. That would be things like insurance costs, utility costs, costs for security, and also costs for members of staff who are essential to the running of the organisation. You have not been able to furlough. So in many cases, that is imams as well. So I'd advise everyone to take a look at that. Go back to our last bulletin, look up the Third Sector Resilience Fund, look at the application form. There's quite a lot to it. There's a lot of information that they will ask for. They'll ask for your current financial situation as well, bank statements, that kind of thing. If you have money lying in the bank, again, a concession they've given to us is that you can explain why that money is there. Say, for example, you were saving money for a capital investment project, an extension, a refurbishment. You can explain that on the form as well. So you can apply for running costs for, I think it's up to 3 months. So I'd encourage you actually to have a look at that and to apply for that, certainly for the Masajid. In terms of mosques communicating with the broader community, this is absolutely critical, and it's going to inform your decision-making process. So it'd be important that you speak, for example, to the police and inform them that you are reopening. It'd be important that you do also speak to other local organisations as well and let them know that the masjid is reopening. It's going to be important for a number of reasons that you speak to the police. One is going to be to inform them that you are opening, but also from a security perspective as well, because what we have seen, unfortunately, during this pandemic is that Islamophobia and Islamophobic attacks haven't abated. They've still continued in some cases. So it's going to be very important that you do engage with the wider community.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just going to ask if Brother Bashir wanted to ask his question now or to type that in, if he's still with us.
So I lost you there, sister.
Can you hear me now?
You're breaking up.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll just see if there's any last questions. Otherwise, I guess we'll just kind of wrap up. I think another point that was raised about whether it's a good opportunity for mosques to perhaps work together and how they open up. Oh, wait, no, actually there's a hand from Brother Usmer as well. So would you like to speak, Brother Usmer? And yeah, just a point about mosque coordinating reopening.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add a point to हमारे बड़े जो हैं Hazrat Imam Sahib, Ishaq Sahib, because you don't often get an opportunity to speak to mosque committees and MCS and ulama together, and this is one of them. That he mentioned a fantastic point of letting the elders know that inshallah, that they'll still get the same reward. كُتِبَ لَهُ مَا كَانَ يَعْمَلُ فِي صِحَّتِهِ, as it comes in the hadith. I just want to add one very important point. The commentators add on to this in sabara, that they put a qaid on it, that if he's patient, Now, if you're going to not go to the mosque
Hello.
and then scream and shout about it, Umar, sorry, I can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay, continue, Brother Asma, you're fine. Yeah, continue.
sorry, I was just Umar. I was saying that the one point that needs to come across, and Umar is very respectful in the way he said the elders are what keep our community safe from lots of fitan and trials and blessings. But if not going to the mosque, you're going to shout and scream, or you're going to cause lots of hassle and forward messages and bad mouth, then you're going to lose that reward. I think that needs to be very, very put across to the community. They need to understand that yes, inshallah, by not going, you will get the same reward. But if you're patient, that needs to be put across. I think that's quite important.
No, thank you. Definitely a really important point. Yeah.
Definitely, Jazakallah khair for that. That's me by. In terms of the working together question, absolutely. This is something that is happening in other parts of the UK, specifically in Birmingham, where the smaller masajid who might not have as much resources as the larger masajid are working together in a kind of buddy system with some of the larger masajid. So this is something that is going to be really important as well, that masajid do support each other as they move forward. Absolutely, it's going to be really important.
Yeah, definitely. There was a point made about how can mosques manage the financial implication of reopening with the requirement of PPE and making sure everything is clean and sanitized, as well as making sure volunteers are trained. So there's a lot of pressure and onus. What should they do about resources?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the training, we're looking at developing a training course for the COVID safety officer or the person responsible within the organisation. So inshallah, we can help certainly with the training aspect of it, keeping them up to date with what's happening and any changes and things like that. In terms of equipment, PPE and cleaning equipment and things, again, as I say, there's the Abdullah Qalim Masjid in Liverpool. They're currently leading on setting up this portal for Masajid where they'll be able to order PPE directly from suppliers at trade prices. So inshallah, that should help as well. And a lot of the cleaning products are actually available just now in places like Booker Cash and Carry. And alhamdulillah, we've got a number of our community who are from the retail trade. So to ask them if they can help us to get those products as well. So there's a number of different ways in which we can approach that. I think what would help, as I say, and this is something that we're actively always engaging with the Scottish Government on, and that is making sure that seeing if we can get a kind of block grant for places of worship, both to help them through the last few months, but also to help them with covering these costs as we do try to come out of lockdown. So very much it's still a work in progress. Inshallah, we'll have more to report on that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, Imam Isaac, would you like to speak?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I think the masajid in England, they are opening earlier than us. So we should have, keep eye on them, that if there is any good practice that we can follow, and if there are any problems, then we can mitigate here, inshallah. So if we can liaison with them and see what is happening there. Jazakallah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's our approach from day one has always been a collaborative one. With MCS, we recognise we maybe don't have the resources or indeed the experience of some of the organisations down south, and we've consistently taken a kind of collaborative approach towards this crisis, both with the materials and things that we've put out, and indeed with sharing best practice as well, and that will absolutely continue. And I know from the UKIM, they're doing a lot of excellent work, and they have been for the last couple of months. So if there's anything that you'd like to share with us, then by all means, please, inshallah, get in touch with me. And this is the same goes for anyone. If you want to get in touch with us, All of our telephone numbers are on the bulletins that we put on a monthly basis. If you need help with comms and things, you can contact our lead on comms. If you need help generally, you can contact myself, Dr. Habib, Brother Shaukat Sultan Sahab, who you all know. So we're here. We're ready.
I think Omar's. Okay, just a last opportunity then, if anybody wants to ask any questions. Imam Mansour from Kirkcaldy, do you have any questions? I see you frequently on the Facebook Lives. We're always sharing all the Jummah reminders, so you've got a very recognizable bookshelf. So you've done it to yourself really today.
I think everything has been covered by Brother Omar, mashallah. I initially had the concern about the children coming back to classes, but alhamdulillah, we've got it. Most mosques have got it set up, through Skype or through Zoom, and that's carrying on. What I feel is that I think maybe we should have more of a standardized system for mosques to follow within our community. It's known that we're quite rogue in our approach, and people might start doing starting practices which may not comply with government guidelines. So I don't know how you feel about maybe making it more standardized and more strict and saying to mosques that this system that we've got and this is what we should follow. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, really good point. And just I think a comment from Awais as well, from Falkirk.
Yeah, hi, Assalamu alaikum. It's just basically a reminder, that over the last month or two, like Brother Omar mentioned, like the mosques were quick to lock down before the official lockdown happened. In that time, I think we need to bear in mind we've had to forego Jamaat prayers, Jummah prayers, we've missed Ramadan, we've missed Eid prayers. I would just urge caution that, as the brother mentioned there earlier, that, England are going to open ahead of us. So it's a good time to basically, do this kind of slowly. And my main reason for saying that was something that Brother Omar also touched on, was the fact that there seems to be some right-wing elements are looking to, pin some blame on Muslims and mosques, yeah? So there's been fake online rumors showing old videos, suggesting that mosques were still open, which turned out to be fake. But I just want to say that, we should just be quite cautious, because we've already given up, we've sacrificed so much already, if you think about it. Like I said, we've missed Eid and Iftaris and everything, Tarawih prayers, that, we should, take a look at what happens at England and almost kind of, baby step it. If you feel like you can't do this on your own, come to the MCS. If there's any resources we can point you to, we're more than happy to do that. But I'll just basically urge caution, because we've already done the hard bit. We've done the hard bit. So it should just be, there should be no rush to open, really. And that was it. Jazakallah.
Thank you, Awais.
Yeah, absolutely. Sheikh Mansour, I take your point on board in terms of maybe saying that this is what you have to do, as opposed to just saying that this is what you should do. MCS, certainly throughout its history, as far as I'm aware, has never been that kind of body where it's regulated mosques. It's more been a representative body. So things like the media, things like the government, things like the police. But I think in a time like this, what we could possibly do is champion where we see good practice. I think that might be a better way of doing it, as opposed to policing masajid. It'll be a better idea possibly if we see good practice, then to promote that and show other people what they can do with the resources that they have, based on what other people are doing with the resources that they've got. And secondly, the point that brother made from Falkirk in terms of the far right in looking at us, absolutely. But I think we should also, again, I'd reiterate his call for caution as well. if we are to look at the example of what happened in Blackburn, I think it was, where there was a small group of people who were praying in the masjid on a regular basis, and they contracted COVID, and very sadly, 2 imams of that masjid passed away. So that in itself should be enough of an anecdote for us to think that we need to take this cautiously, and we do have to take this virus seriously, and understand that it hasn't gone away yet, that it's still very much there, and we could well be in the midst of a second wave of it within the next few months. So that's something that we do need to bear in mind, to keep in the back of our minds. The other thing that I would mention is that, alhamdulillah, on Eid, we had the first ever Eid broadcast from anywhere in the UK, and that was a masjid in Scotland. It was from Glasgow Central Mosque. It's still available on iPlayer. You can still go on and watch it, but I would encourage members of the public to actually give positive feedback for that programme as well, for the very same reason, because we know that there will be people out there who will be giving negative feedback. So it's important that we do encourage the BBC and say, yeah, well done for having this programme, we really benefited from it, so that they do look at having more programmes like that in the future. So that's just something that I know that's not quite relevant, but it's important to mention that is something that we do need to keep in mind.
Okay, I think it's now time for us to wrap up, inshallah. And again, thank everybody for their contributions today. We will have a closing dua by our convener, but just before that, I think just some of the takeaway messages. We'll be sending everybody the guidance, inshallah, and there is a recording of this webinar that will go around, and you can also watch it on our Facebook. The key point is that mosques will be opening, but really now is the opportunity for us to make sure we do that in a safe way, in a measured way, but also in a collaborative way, which is why we're so grateful that so many of you have joined us today, and we appreciate the time and the sacrifice you've done, given to be here and also to contribute. And what's also really important is that MCS is here to support you through that journey, and we'll keep on continuing to give Scottish Government the critical feedback that you're giving us with regards to what are the challenges going to be, and also making sure that the community leads on how we reopen and not the other way around. So thank you all again. I'll pass it over to Dr. Mohammed, inshallah, to do a closing dua, and we'll finish.
So thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you, our MCS team, Sister Zara and Brother Umar, who have done very hard work to bring this webinar to us today. And secondly, I will thank you, all of you who have attended this webinar, which was designed to help you and guide you so that you can make necessary arrangements to reopen your mosques. Inshallah, it will be good for us, as Brother Umar and everyone said. As you know, it is very important and good news for us. At the same time, it is the cautious thing for us to as well need to take consideration, because if any case happens in the mosque, it would be very problematic for us. We need to take extra care. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all. And once again, I thank you, everyone. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik sallim. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. صلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك.
Okay, everyone, assalamu alaikum, and have a really enjoyable rest of the weekend. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Welcome, Islam.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.
Walaikum salam.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you very much for all your advice.